Welcome, students. We are in Lesson 30 of Algebra 1. We're going to talk about algebraic phrases for just a moment. Sometimes we're going to have word problems, and those word problems are going to say things like the sum of, or the product of, or the difference, or the quotient of. Well, we know from what we've been doing on our homework and in our tests that sum equals adding, product equals multiplication, difference is subtraction, and quotient is division, right? We're also going to have some words like opposite of, and opposite just means to change the sign. If it's a positive, you make it a negative. If it's negative, you make it a positive, right? And typically when it says the opposite of a number, you just make it negative because it's understood that the number is already some value that we don't know. So when you put a negative in front of it, let's say a negative n, the opposite of some number, whatever this number is, it could be a negative number. It could be a -3. But when you put a negative in front of it, that changes it to a positive. So it changes it to the opposite of whatever that number is by putting the negative symbol in front of it. So that's what that means. When it says the opposite of some number, just put the negative sign in front of it. Obviously, if it says times, that's going to be multiplication because we've been using that for a very long time already. Probably since you began learning your multiplication tables in elementary. When you have the words it's less than or decreased by, those are indicators that you're going to have some more subtraction. When you hear the words greater than or increased by, then those are your clues that you're going to have some addition. Now, sometimes you're going to hear phrases like the sum of this number and this number. It's a pretty safe bet to use parentheses when you have the word sum of, just because it's pointing to those two numbers in particular. So if it says the sum of some number and 5, and is a plus sign. So it's something else we need to write down. And, A-N-D, not A-M-D. Miss Tracy, try to spell a little bit. There you go. And, or sum, equals a plus. So the sum of n and 5 would look like that. You would want to put them in parentheses by themselves. And you might hear something like the sum of some number and 5 times 2 or twice the sum of some number and 5 decreased by 8. Okay, that would be what it would look like. Okay, so twice is 2, right? Twice equals 2 times. And triple a number equals 3 times that number. Right, so we see there's like more going on with language. It's not just about the numbers, it's about the words too. And so we need to start paying attention. We're going to have these word problems that we have to convert into equations. So we need to start identifying what these words mean when they're strung together and how to write them out so that we can solve them. We can go from words to an answer. So pay attention to these words and really think about what they're trying to say. Let's clear the page and we're going to talk about decimal parts of a number. Many people call decimal numbers decimal fractions because terminating decimal numbers can be written as fractions. For instance, if you have this number here, this can be turned into a fraction by counting the number of decimal spaces, right? We have 2 decimal spaces, so we put 2 zeros and a 1 in front of it to hold them in place. And then we just transfer the whole number on top. And that works for however many decimal places you have. So if we have this number, all we have to do is count the number of decimal places. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay? Do that again for you. We're moving it back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's 9 zeros. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I didn't make my thing long enough, did I? Let me do that. Let me make that longer. So that equals 1 billion, because this would be 1 million, so this is 1 billion. And you can drop the 0 in the front and just start with the 2. And I can show you that this is correct by pulling this up. And I can say 2863247 divided by, and that's 9 zeros, so 1 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 equals, and that's the number we started with. 028632047. Exactly the way it was. So that's how you can write the fractional part of any number that is a decimal by counting the number of decimal places and putting that many zeros behind a 1, and then taking this number and putting it on top as a whole number, or as a numerator, I should say. All right, so that's pretty straightforward and easy. We could practice a few more. If we had 0.2, that would equal 2 over 10, because we only have one decimal place, right? If we had 0.403, that would equal 403 over 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So that is a really easy way to transfer a decimal into a fraction. If you need to make a decimal or fraction in a problem for whatever reason, that is how you do it. Count the decimal places and then put it over 1. To turn a decimal into a fraction, okay, count the decimal places and put that many zeros behind the number 1 in the denominator, then put the number itself without decimals, or without a decimal, in the numerator. All right, easy peasy. Anybody can do that. It's just a pattern. It is a simple pattern. Count that many zeros behind a 1 and then take the number and stick it on top. Easy peasy. All right, you're going to want to put that in your notes. And make sure you have those examples so that it illustrates the words. Okay? And then let's do some practice problems with all that we've learned. All right, I'm going to clear the page. If you need more time, pause the video. And let's do 30.1. All right, so we have a problem that is asking us to use words and fractions. So it says 0.32 of what number is 24.32? Okay, so how do we set this up, Miss Tracy? All right, we're going to set this up like a word problem. And what we will do is we will use this format. D times of equals is. All right, so the decimal of times the of is your equal, and you put what it is here. So the decimal is 0.32 of what number? We don't know. So we're going to put x right here because we don't know what the number is. Equals what? What is it? It is 24.32. So when we put that all together, we get 0.32x equals 24.32. Right? Right. Okay, now, because these are both decimals, we can turn them into a fraction, which makes them easier to solve. So we are going to do that now, and we're going to turn those into, this has two decimal places, so 32 over 2 zeros, 1 and 2 zeros, times x equals, same thing on this side, we have two decimal places, so 2, 4, 3, 2 over 2 zeros, right? Now we're going to multiply both sides by what's in the denominator so we can get rid of the fraction. So we multiply both sides times 100, right? Because the golden rule of equations is whatever you do to one side, you got to do to the other side. So when we do that, the 100s cancel out. So we're left with 32x equals 2,432. Now we can just divide. So we pull up our calculator and we just divide 2432 divided by 32. That's 76. So we divided this side by 32. We divided this side by 32 because whatever you do to one side, you go to the other side. X is going to equal, what did we say it was? 76. So that's 76. All right, so now we know that 0.32 of 76 is 24.32. All right? It's starting to get a little bit more complicated, but we know how to do this. We do know how to do this, and y'all are going to just fine because we're starting to put all of our rules together. Okay? Let's do 30.2. It's another one like this. Let's clear the page. All right, this one says, what decimal part of 42 is 2604. We're going to use the same formula, decimal of, or decimal, sorry, decimal times the of, right, equals the is. So what decimal? We don't know what the decimal is. The decimal is x. The of is 42. And the is 26.04. Right? So what decimal part of 42 is this? Well, because this number times x is not a decimal, we're not going to do the other. We're just going to leave it like it is. We have 42. We put the x behind 2604, right, with our decimal here. We can just divide both of these if we want to. Now, if you don't like that decimal there, then go ahead and do the same thing that you did to the other. It is perfectly okay. You can do that. The rules allow for you to do that just as long as whatever you do to this side, you do to this side. You don't have to, but we're going to do it anyway to make you feel better. So in this case, we're just going to add 2 zeros on this side. And then we're going to bump this up to no decimals on this side. Right? So now we are going to divide both sides by 4,200. This cancels, so x becomes, let's see what x becomes. We're just going to do the calculation. 2604 divided by 4,200 equals 0.62. All right, so 0.62 could also equal 62 over 100 because there's 2 decimal places. Now, the reason I did that is because we can't reduce 62, but we can reduce this. 62 divided by 2 is 31. And 100 divided by 2 is 50. So you can reduce, when you turn it into a fraction, you can reduce it to a smaller fraction. Whereas with this number, it just kind of has to stay there. That's all. You can't do anything with a fraction. You also can't factor a decimal. I said fraction earlier, I meant decimal. You can turn this decimal into a fraction, and then you can factor it to find a number that you can wrap your head around. So the answer here would be either 0.62 or 31 over 50. Either one of these is a correct answer. Okay? Awesome. All right, let's clear the page. And what they're doing with this type of a lesson is they're trying to get you to see the relationship between the different formats of numbers and what they look like and how they work together, so that you can manipulate those numbers just a little bit more and make them do what you want them to do. Okay? 30.3. .42 of 86 is what number? Now, if you're writing all of these down, then you're going to get this formula. Decimal times of equals the is. Okay? In fact, I would make sure you write that down because you're going to need it later. It's going to be in your homework. I guarantee it. I've seen your homework. So we put this in for the decimal, 0.42. And of, we multiply the of. So that's going to be times 86. Equals, we don't know what that number is, so that's our x. So now what we're going to do is we are going to multiply 0.42 times 86, which is pretty self-explanatory. When you have a problem like this, you don't have to do the transition from a decimal to a whole number. Unless you really want to, it's not necessary. And in all those other problems, it wasn't necessary either, but it did help us to see the problem better. 0.42 times 86 is 36.12. So 36.12, or I should properly say 36 and 12/100ths equals x. So 0.42, or if you write it like this, 42 of 100, that equals 42%. 42% of 86 is 36 and 12/100ths. And that is the answer here. And that's as far as you have to go with that one. All right, that's another thing that I wanted to talk about is anything that is a decimal with only 2 places can easily be turned into a percent by just moving the decimal and putting the percent sign behind it. If you have a 3-digit number, you have a 0.457, that would be 45.7%. Why? Because percent means out of 100. And 100, this is your 100th place right here. So that is where the decimal moves to. 2 places is 100. So the second place is where the decimal goes if you want to turn it into a percent. That's just a side note. That's not part of the lesson, but I thought it was interesting and that you might want to understand that. All right, that's all I have for lesson 30. I'll see you in lesson 31.